Hey guys, my name is Louie. I struggled with addiction for 17 to 18 years, from about the time I was 17 years old to about the time I was 34 years old. I ended up getting sober about 4 years ago. Along the way, I got help and support from a lot of truly great people, healthcare professionals, my brothers and sisters in addiction, friends and family, loved ones. And, life has its ups and downs, but it's good now. I've never been happier. It's truly been an amazing transformation. As I reflect on my journey and on how things went, I realized how much suffering that I put myself through, how hopeless and lonely I once was, and how much suffering that I had also caused those around me, loved ones and friends who cared about me. I encountered a lot of people along my journey who helped me out, and part of being of service is helping others, paying back for what others did for you early on, or paying it forward. My goal is to reduce the suffering people subject themselves to through their addiction by sharing both experiences I've had and things that I've learned, both pre and post sobriety. The idea here is that hopefully by sharing these things, it'll help people to decide to start their journey towards sobriety, or perhaps it'll ease that journey. It is rather difficult in the beginning, or maybe it'll help those who have already started their journey to stay on the path. That being said, if you find this insightful, please share it with others. If you're listening to this through iTunes, please take a moment to review it and rate it under the ratings and reviews section. That'll help it get out to more people, and I'd like to touch as many people who are struggling with addiction as possible. Oh, and one other thing. Some of you guys may think the name of the podcast is odd. I chose the name Self-Inflicted Recovery, Redemption, and Life because for me, my addiction was self-inflicted pain and suffering, and my recovery and redemption were also self-inflicted. I chose how all of those things happened. I chose when they happened, and life was happening the entire time. Alright, so in this episode, I'll discuss a few things. They may seem to be disconnected, but the commonality is connection by way of relationships within a support system, and how it can help those of us trying to get sober. So, since I've become sober, I've come to value connections and relationships much more. I've been living in the same city for over 30 years, so I run into people from a long time ago from time to time. I was at lunch with a friend of mine from high school several months back, and he'd had his struggles. He didn't seem to struggle the way I did, and from hearing him talk, he doesn't identify himself as an addict, which is fine. He knew about my struggles and my obsessive behavior over the years with regard to addiction. Most of the people who had spent a lot of time with me were aware of these things. Anyway, we hadn't seen each other for years. We talked about a lot of different things, life, work, children, who we still knew from back in the day, who we hung out with. I told him about myself and getting clean. We discussed our careers. One of the things that I mentioned to him was my newfound value for relationships and connections. And I explained that when I was using, I wasn't interested in having anything beyond a surface connection or a topical relationship with people. I wasn't interested in investing time or energy into it because I could take that very same time and energy and use it to feed my addiction. And if I invested that time in relationships with people, I wouldn't get any type of instant payback for the effort. And he said, yeah, man, I get it. The way I used to look at things was if I couldn't get something from someone that I needed right then, if their relationship didn't benefit me right in that moment in time, I wasn't going to invest the time and the energy. And that was it in a nutshell. That was a perfect description of my old perspective. Now, I've done a complete 180 with regards to relationships. I have a support system, and it includes people from different ages, sexes, career choices, sexual orientations. These are people who I have love for. They're people who have love for me. And my relationship with them goes beyond the old relationships that revolved around only using together. We're able to share life with one another, the good things, the struggles, and support one another and hold one another accountable. And it's also great to know that you aren't alone. When I was using, I was extremely isolated and I was almost completely alone. Now I'm in my late 30s, and I've been building relationships for the last few years with people who are both younger than me, people who are close to my age, and also people who were older than me. Now, let me digress for a moment here and talk about the concept of what might have been. And I promise I'll tie this back into recovery in a moment here. It is related. So, I read a lot of science fiction. I have for a long time. Ray Bradbury wrote a short story. Later on, this short story was turned into a series of novels. Later on, after that, it became a movie, which was absolutely terrible. It was an abomination. It was a crime against humanity, nature, and literature, and it was an insult to Ray Bradbury. In any event, the short story was called The Sound of Thunder. Check out the story. You can find it online. Don't bother checking out the movie. It was awful. But here's a brief synopsis. So, in this story, time travel had been invented, and people can buy time safaris, and they can go back and they can hunt big game, creatures that are extinct, including dinosaurs. So there's this guy named Eccles, and he pays to go back in time, and he wants to hunt a Tyrannosaurus Rex. The thing is, they have to be super careful to not alter the future by changing things in the past. And the way they address that is they have a metal path that floats 6 to 8 inches above the ground. So the time travelers can't change the future by touching the ground and changing things in the past. They only kill animals right before the animals would have gotten killed by some natural event, and they don't take back any trophies. Again, these two things are in place so as not to disrupt the future. The day they travel back in time is the day after a presidential election, and everyone at the beginning of the story is happy with the election's outcome. The candidate who lost was going to become a dictator, and that's why everyone was relieved that he didn't win the election. So they get in the time machine, they go back in time, they encounter the T-Rex. Eccles freaks out and has a mental breakdown during the imposing magnificence of the King of Lizards. Or I should say during the encounter with the King of Lizards. He panics, he runs away, and the rest of the hunting party kills the T-Rex. Well, while Eccles is fleeing back to the time machine, he falls off the path. Initially, he doesn't think he disrupts anything, and everyone assumes that things will be fine. They get back in the time machine, they travel back to the present, and as soon as they get out of the time machine, they can tell that something is different. But initially, they can't tell what. It turns out that when Eccles fell off the path, he stepped on a small butterfly and killed it. As a result, the future was altered, and they find out eventually that what was different was that the person who had lost the election originally has actually won it. So now the dictator is in power. Now, here's how this ties back into addiction and building up a support system made up of strong relationships with a diverse group of like-minded people. When I see someone who's younger than me, could be 18, could be 21, could be 27, could be 30, whatever, I see an opportunity to change their future by changing their present. What I mean is, I look at them and I see myself at that age. And I realize that if someone had intercepted me and supported me in getting sober at that age, things could have very much been different for me. I could have conceivably saved myself and my loved ones lots of pain. It could have been the equivalent of Eccles killing the butterfly or not killing it and changing the outcome of the election or the outcome of the future. When my kids were born, I knew I'd have to address my addictive tendencies because I knew that the choice I made now would influence my future, my wife's future, and my children's future. I realized that because I was drunk and high all the time, I wasn't really present. And I would see pictures from a year or so ago, but I wouldn't actually have a memory of that. I was scared that if I didn't address my addiction, time would fly by even faster, and one day I would wake up and find that my children are 18 or 23 or 30 or whatever, and that I had failed them because I didn't love them as much as I could have, or care about them as much as I could have, or prepare them for the world by teaching them as much as I could have. Or perhaps I wouldn't have much of a relationship with them because I was either emotionally distant with them or lost my temper and did something terrible or abusive at some point, or any one of a million other negative possibilities. What if I killed someone in a drunk driving accident and then got thrown in jail for a large portion of their childhood? This could have been the result of being emotionally disengaged. I was scared that if I didn't address my addiction, time would fly by even faster, and one day I'd wake up to find that my children are 18 or 23 or 30 or whatever, and that I failed them because I didn't love them as much as I could have. Or perhaps I hadn't cared about them as much as I could have, or prepared them for the world by teaching them as much as I could have, or have much of a relationship because I was emotionally distant and did not invest in that relationship, or maybe I lost my temper and did something terrible or abusive at some point, or any one of a million other negative possibilities. These things could have been the result of being emotionally disengaged because I was constantly in an altered state, or it could have been because I continued, ruining my relationship with my wife and we got a divorce, and I saw my children much less because of custody or whatever the case is. These are all futures that could have been. It could have resulted from the butterfly getting killed, or in my case, choosing to not get sober at 34 years old and then following through with it. Some of the people in my support group are older than me. Their kids are my age, or perhaps close to my age, and many of them, even the people who I spend time with who are not in recovery, can teach me something. I know a gentleman from earlier in my life, substantially older than me. He got married around the same time I did, and my wife and I attended his wedding. He has a son about my son's age. I reconnected with him a while back after quite a long time, and it turned out things didn't work out with the marriage, and we talked about that. And I was there to support someone who became my friend, and in return, I felt good to be there and offer that support, and we processed some of the feelings from that together, and I got to learn what I could do about the potential pitfalls he experienced in his relationship, things that led to it failing. I also get support from him by drawing on his experiences around his relationships, his experience with his career, lots of different things, and it allows me to change my future by changing my present. I have another friend who's older than me, and he struggled with his addiction until he was much older than I was, and his family situation had been impacted by it, and he was in a substantial amount of emotional pain because of that. And a moment ago, I was describing the negative possible future scenarios, right? Estranged children, divorce, etc. For a while there, his reality was very similar to that future scenario that I mentioned with estranged children and divorce. For me, it was an example of what could have been. I had a friend of mine from high school, and when I was probably 24 or 25, he died from drunk driving, and that could have been me at any time. Not only did he kill himself and rob the world of his amazing presence, I mean, this guy was funny, he was crazy, he was just truly alive, and the world is a less friendly place because he's gone, but it also caused his family and friends pain. He'd also injured some other folks in the accident who weren't in his vehicle, and it caused them and their families a great deal of pain as well. This also could have been me at any time. It's another future that could have been. I also have friends who are younger than me. I try to walk them through sobriety if it applies, and the struggles that go along with it. I'd like to help them end that pain. Or if they aren't in recovery or struggle with addiction, I'm still there to help them out and talk them through, trials and struggles of life if I can, share my experiences if they're applicable, and learn from them and their perspective and their experiences, because surely they're somewhat different than mine. Sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable, regardless of age, because we have to discuss our faults and our failures. And sometimes, it's necessary to hold one another accountable, or maybe help one another to make the difficult decisions. See, I didn't have a lot of friends when I grew up who were willing to have deep, sometimes uncomfortable conversations. And I didn't have a lot of people around who cared about me enough to hold me accountable. We never talked about our failures. We never compared notes on experiences in hopes of improving ourselves. And it's incredibly rewarding when someone in my circle of friends, including myself, realizes something, learns something, or gains some kind of clarity around themselves or others or their behavior, and the best way to move forward as a result of opening up to others and talking through things. It's an amazing gift to both give and receive. But the thing is, without connection and relationships and a support system, we're not able to give or receive that gift. And so every single outcome that befalls someone, Whether it's good or bad, that could be you. It all depends on what decisions you're making right now. And having people at different ages and perspectives in your support system gives you insight into things that might have been. Or maybe they can help you gain an understanding of something that happened in the past. I could have continued using. I could have continued not living up to my potential, driven my marriage into the ground, but I chose to change that outcome. I stepped on the butterfly, or avoided stepping on the butterfly, however you want to look at it, when I decided to blindly sign up for IOP based on the trust of relative strangers and my own desperation. So your future is in your hands, based on the decisions that you make for yourself right now. This applies whether or not you struggle with addiction. How do you want things to turn out? Do you want to lose more time? Continue living inconsistently with your values and your principles? Continue not living up to your potential? If you haven't already, I encourage you to start building relationships with a diverse group of people who are like-minded, who want the same things that you want. Support each other. Don't be afraid to talk about things that are uncomfortable. Failures, character defects, struggles. Draw on one another's strength and experience and perspectives. Figure out what you want for yourself and for your loved ones, and then pursue it by acting accordingly. Let me know what you guys think. If you agree, disagree, send me comments, perspectives, give me some feedback. Shoot me ideas for topics you'd like for me to discuss or hear my thoughts on. I can be reached at selfinflictedrrl@gmail.com. If you found this helpful and insightful, please share it with others. If you are listening to this via iTunes, please take a moment to rate it, write a review in the ratings and review section. This will help it to circulate and reach more people. For this episode, I came up with the content myself. Editing and audio work was done by Doug Snyder. That's all I have for you guys this evening. Take care of yourselves and give some serious consideration to getting a support system and starting to get rid of that isolation by connecting with people. Louie out.